One of the best, Yahoo NBA, Keith Smith, RealGM. Check out his front office podcast as well. Great job, Keith Smith, on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Welcome back, Keith. How's it going, man?
It's good. I was just telling Josh, as we were coming in there, I think I've slept about 5 hours in the last 2 days, and that's probably more than a lot of my colleagues have, so I'll take it.
Well, I'll tell you, it started last night with a flurry. Let's go back to Tobias Harris and that move by Elton Brand that kind of got the fireworks started. 2:30 in the morning, it had all started off with the Sixers kind of jumping the gun and taking Tobias Harris from the Clippers in a 6-player deal. Your thoughts on that deal that really got this trade deadline started?
Yeah, when you look at the deal on its face, which I think these things, you really want to evaluate them as much as possible as individual transactions and not against other things that happen. But, there's a natural inclination to do that. But on its face, the 76ers did a fantastic job in this trade. They got Tobias Harris, who's a massive upgrade over anything that they sent out. Mike Gill, Wilson Chandler, and Landry Shamet. He's going to immediately move into the starting lineup and, be really good. He was almost an all-star in the Western Conference, which is not an easy thing to pull off. Boban Marjanovic, that gives them a decent backup, behind Joel Embiid. He's a guy, if you need to sit Embiid, which I think we might see them do some down the stretch here just because he's been so banged up, and, credit to him for playing through it. You've got a guy you can plug in there, and then you can give him the 10 minutes a night or so that Embiid sits. And then you added, in addition to that, Mike Scott, who's a good, solid backup, who's had a couple nice years in the NBA and, is used to coming off the bench and isn't going to complain. So they did really well. What's now got people a little bit in a tizzy is moves for guys like Otto Porter and Nikola Mirotic that teams didn't pay quite as much of a price for. That has people somewhat upset. But, overall, Philly, went in, and this is a move that's going to really help them the rest of this year as well as down the line, because the goal, it seems to be, to keep Harris along with Jimmy Butler in there and build around that big four grouping along with Simmons and Embiid.
Fit. Tobias Harris, you mentioned Scott and Boban, and I think Boban is underrated because you're right. Joel needs a guy to kind of give him a break. They desperately need it. They've never had a rim protector since he's been here. I guess Nerlens was here for a short time, but that didn't really work out. However, Boban gives him a presence in the middle to let him sit. Scott's a guy who's athletic and shoot a little bit. But obviously Harris is the key to this deal. How does he fit with this crew?
Yeah, I think the one thing you worry about is the same thing we worried about since Jimmy Butler got there, is you're only allowed to play with one basketball, and that's a challenge at times for this team still. There's, on occasion it gets a little clunky. But the good thing is he's an elite level shooter this season from basically any of the shooting categories, whether it be spot up or off the dribble or out of pick and roll or in the post. He's just knocking down everything. He's very, very close to a 50-40-90 season, so 50% from the field, 40% or more from three, and then 90% from the free throw line, that's kind of hallowed territory, especially for a forward to pull that off. And Harris is just about there. So, even if he only plays the Wilson Chandler role of stand in the corner and, knock down open jumpers, that's fine because he's a big upgrade on Chandler. From that, he's also grabbing a career high, almost 8 rebounds a game. But now what you have is you've got some options for staggering the units a little bit better. You can, there should never be a period in a game where Brett Brown should be in any kind of key minutes without a minimum of one, ideally two, of Embiid, Simmons, Butler, and Harris on the floor, which is a huge upgrade over where Philadelphia was, a couple days ago.
Yeah, I said to our audience yesterday, Keith, that I think if you don't like the trade for Tobias Harris, it's essentially because you just don't know enough about Tobias Harris. This is a guy that was a borderline Western Conference all-star, and, quite frankly, 43%. He walks in as, I know JJ makes more, but highest percentage of the team. Only 3 guys in the NBA made more threes than Tobias Harris. Some guy named Steph Curry, another guy named Klay Thompson, and Buddy Hield. So this guy can shoot it.
Yeah, he absolutely can, and he's a pretty good defender. He's they're going to be very switchable now, throughout the lineup, which is really, really good. They now also look at when they play Boston. for example, a team that they've, well known to have a lot of struggles against. Well, what the Celtics have done this year is they hide Kyrie Irving on Wilson Chandler, and they say, you want to use Wilson Chandler in the post? Go ahead. If that's what you want to do, go at us that way. Now there's nowhere to hide. Now they've got 5 quality offensive players on the floor, and again, they should be in a position to have, a minimum of 2 of them on the floor at all times in games.
Keith, Markelle Fultz shipped out of town. He's down in Orlando, a team that you know pretty well. Jonathan Simmons, a first-round pick, which is Oklahoma City's in 2020, and a second-round pick. Number one, as the days came on, it didn't seem as shocking that Fultz got moved. It seemed like that was bound to happen. However, there was a lot of talk up here about the return. What could they actually get for him? Did you think Elton Brand did a good job in the return for Fultz, or based on the return, would you have held on to him to see if you could have got something out of the former number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, I think they did the best they could. You could really go pie in the sky and say maybe he makes it back and he looks really good at the end of the year. Then you can trade him for something of really great value. But the reality is you got Jonathan Simmons, who's a playoff-tested guy. He's somebody who should help in the rotation towards the back end. And you got a first-round pick. It's a protected first-round pick, but it's going to convey this year, barring Oklahoma City completely falling apart. So you're going to get that pick, and that that'll be a nice pick, for them to have going forward, to add, a little more depth and flesh out the rotation a little bit. So, the challenge with Fultz is, a lot of people want to say, well, what if he came back and was good? Well, what if he never made it back? Then you're not getting anything for him, and then at that point he just becomes a salary albatross, sitting on the books. So you really, I think Elton Brand did as good as he could here. It's kind of a sad ending to Fultz's tenure, but on the flip side, you got to feel good for him because he's now going to get this opportunity here in Orlando to really, be kind of the guy he is outside of any sort of spotlight. I live in Orlando, and I probably ask 100 people here, and maybe 5 really care. And this is it's going to be good for him because he's going to be able to just focus on getting healthy and playing basketball.
You mentioned Simmons. They also got James Ennis from the Rockets. Those 2 pieces. You talked about Boston. Last year they had such problems with Boston defending the three-point line and the perimeter. Ennis, Simmons, Scott, the group of guys they got, how does that change the dynamic between Philly and Boston now?
Yeah, what it does is it allows Philly to be really switchable. They can now, go when they get into a series with Boston or Toronto or even Milwaukee, they can, really, switch around a bunch of different guys. It allows them to leave Joel Embiid at home a little bit more because you can throw some of these bigger bodies out on a guy like, say, Al Horford or Giannis Antetokounmpo or, even Brook Lopez without as much worry because you don't have those holes where, all right, then those guys are just going to turn around and take them down inside and score on them with Joel out of position. So that's really, I think, important, for them. And it's also, these are guys who have been around for a while, so you're not relying on untested players. I know a lot of people really like Landry Shamet, but the challenge with him is, he's a rookie, and you don't want to go into the playoffs having to rely too much on rookies. You really want to go in there with guys who have been there and, you know what you're going to get out of them. So I think now they went from being one of the more shallow teams in the entire NBA to one of the deeper teams.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people might not know Simmons, might not know Scott. Boban people know just because he's a character, and he's on the he, by the way, their press conference is going on right now. We'll have that for you at the bottom of the hour, and apparently Boban has already cracked a couple laughs in that thing, but we'll air that for you in about 15 minutes. But James Ennis, talk about, too. I mean, I think this was an underrated pickup because Brand made the trade for Malachi Richardson yesterday. People thought, okay, they needed a shooter. Maybe I said, there's no way Toronto's giving you a guy who they think can do anything. And here it was just to kind of clear out a roster spot, and then they bring Ennis in, which I think was a really underrated move. This guy can shoot it and defend.
Yeah, he can. He's got great size for a wing. He can really, hold his own anywhere from 2 through the smaller 4s in the league. He can really play them, the more perimeter-based bigs. He can, step out on them also. And he's had his struggles at times, but he can really, shoot the ball and do some things. And I've heard some people say, well, if he's so good, why are the Rockets giving up on him? Well, the Rockets are just going in a different direction, and their goal, was very clear at the trade deadline of we need to get off money and save against the luxury tax. When you mentioned Jonathan Simmons, I think he's kind of gone forgotten because he's been in Orlando the last couple of years. This is a guy who was a key to a couple of playoff runs for the San Antonio Spurs, and he was a guy San Antonio regularly put on James Harden and said, go, you defend him one-on-one, and nobody stops James Harden, but Simmons does as good a job as anybody does against him. So I think these are two guys who might really show up and help Philadelphia down the stretch and into the playoffs.
Keith Smith, Yahoo Sports, covers the NBA, the trade deadline today. That's just in the Philly realm. A lot happened, and buyouts are still to come. So this trade deadline. Yes, Anthony Davis did not get traded, but this lived up to the hype. Let's go to Toronto. I don't get this deal. Maybe you can explain it to me a little bit more. All right, they get Gasol, but they gave up 3 players, including Valanciunas. And to me, Valanciunas and Gasol, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of similarities there, and they gave up 2 depth players. I don't love the deal for Toronto, but maybe Kawhi picked one over the. I don't know. I mean, explain to me that deal in your view.
Yeah, so a couple things with this trade is, one is you don't really worry about C.J. Miles being a part of it because he wasn't really playing this year. We look at that, that's more of a name than it is a game at this point. He just hasn't been out there, and doing too much for the Raptors. And then DeLon Wright, that's a position, the point guard spot where the Raptors have really, really good depth. They've got Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet. They also like Norman Powell, who they can shift over to that spot. So they're really covered there. So that, makes it Gasol against Valanciunas. And the thing with Valanciunas is he has been there for a long time. He's kind of been there, done that with the Raptors. But the challenge when you get him in these playoff series, let's say against the Philadelphia, he gets played off the floor either because he gets himself in foul trouble or he just can't keep up. He can't step out and defend against these bigs who like to step out on the floor like an Al Horford. Gasol's going to give them equivalent to that defensively, but he's just a smarter and better defender. So he's going to become kind of what I like to call their rugged defender. He's going to be the guy they throw on the Embiids of the world or the Brook Lopez's. And then when they play the Al Horfords of the world, they'll go with Serge Ibaka, as they have been doing for most of the season. And the other thing is it allows them not to have to change their offense because they like to play with their 5-man out around the arc, which is where they've primarily had Ibaka. When Gasol comes in, he'll stay out around the perimeter because he can knock down 3-point shots. In addition, he's a fantastic passer, so that opens up a couple more opportunities in the playbook for Nick Nurse because their other bigs just weren't great passers.
Mirotic goes to Milwaukee. What does that do for the Bucks now?
Yeah, that's huge for them. They were really lacking consistent big that they could rely on behind Antetokounmpo and Lopez. So what this does for the Bucks is that gives them Mirotic, who has been very, very good. He's been a guy who's been in a lot of playoff games now, a lot of big moments for both the Pelicans and prior to that for the Bulls. So this is going to be, a nice piece for them to have. The other thing is Ersan Ilyasova. I know Philly's familiar with him from his run with them last year. He's kind of having a down year. He just hasn't really been the same guy. And a lot of those minutes have gone to DJ Wilson, who stepped forward as a young player. But again, you don't want to trust and have to count on that in the playoffs. So what they've done by adding Mirotic now is they've got their 3-big rotation that they'll run through with Giannis, Lopez, and Mirotic in the playoffs. And that's as good as anybody else can put out there for a 3-big rotation.
Boston did nothing. Why?
Because Anthony Davis, they can't trade for him yet, so they're waiting. They sat there patiently. The only move they did do is they shuttled off Jabari Bird to the Atlanta Hawks to open up a roster spot. They'll use that in buyout season. What I've been told is they're going to look to use that on a guy who will sign a 2-year contract for the rest of their mid-level exception. Is then they can use that money towards salary matching for a trade for Anthony Davis. But it's all about Anthony Davis for the Celtics. So while a lot of people say they were a loser at the trade deadline because all the other teams got better, the Celtics are 29-6, I want to say, in their last 35 games, or 26-9, it's something like that. They're playing really good basketball. They finally look like the team many expected them to be. So while their direct competitors got better this year, their sights are on the rest of this year. Plus, they're going fishing this summer to land the big one in Davis. And Danny Ainge feels confident that he's going to have the best package that the Pelicans just can't turn down when it comes down to it.
Man, I really hope they don't get him and Kyrie walks out. That would make my day. Keith Smith, Yahoo, NBA. All right, some other things that have happened. Number one, before we get to those other things, first, break down the East those four, I guess, if you want to include Indiana, they're still in the 4th spot. Looks like they're going to get Wes Matthews in the buyout market here. So how do you see the East after the 3 o'clock deadline?
Yeah, I don't want to take – it hurts to take Indiana out, and I think that they can be an interesting matchup. I think the top 4 would prefer to avoid them. I think there's some, buzz building of, oh, the Nets are the team you don't want to play. And, but teams don't generally win their first time through. So, I'll take Indiana out of the mix for now, and I'm obviously not going to put Brooklyn in there. So, if you're gonna rank them, going into it, I think you got to give Milwaukee the nod. They've been the best team to this point. There's no reason to see them falling off. They've got, good depth and good frontline players, there. I still have Boston second. I think, the Celtics are finally playing, the type of basketball that many expected. All their guys have bought into their roles. They're fitting in, fantastic. And then I've pushed Philly above Toronto because I think, as long as they can figure it out, how to fit those 4 guys together, and also still make sure you get David Redick enough touches because he's not effective if he's only going to get 2 or 3 shots a night. We saw that in his Clippers days when that happened. It just wasn't good for his game. Philly's going to be really, really tough to beat. And I think Toronto, despite making the big move for Gasol, I just think they've started to slide. They've had some injury concerns. Lowry and Leonard are both banged up a little bit. They've been missing some games. And I think you're starting to see Toronto slide back in the pack. And now they just don't have, that good depth that they had before, despite the fact that they feel pretty good in the positions where they traded guys away. They don't have that great depth that they used to have.
All right, a couple things. Spending some time with Keith Smith, Yahoo Sports, and, man, I don't even know where to start. I mean, there's so many things happening here. Let's go with Wayne Ellington.
By my count, 24 trades since the Kristaps Porzingis trade was made, what feels like a week ago.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I was on the airplane flying back from the Super Bowl. We were at the Super Bowl when that happened. I was flying back from the airport, listening to some podcasts. I was listening to Woj's podcast about that whole thing, and I was like, my gosh, this is going to set up a wild trade deadline, and here we are. By the way, at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter, at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter. I want to go to Wayne Ellington because he's a name that I think Philly might be interested in the buyout market.
Yeah, 100%. He's going to be waived likely today by the Phoenix Suns. If not today, it'll be tomorrow. They're already working towards that. Wayne Ellington had to agree to waive his no-trade clause to go to Phoenix in that trade, and he only did so with the understanding that he would be waived. So the challenge there is that, it's not going to be just Philly. There's going to be a lot of teams hot on him because he is the best wing shooter on the market now that it looks like Wesley Matthews is going to go to the Indiana Pacers.
Wes Matthews, is that going to happen? He's going to go to Indiana?
Yeah, that seems pretty well locked in. He's familiar with Nate McMillan from their Portland days together, and it sounds like that's where he wants to be. And again, they have all the minutes in the role for him with Victor Oladipo out, so that seems like that one's guaranteed to go down.
We also have Cantor waived. He'll become a free agent. I don't think he's a fit for Philly. Do you?
No, probably not. He's just not what they need now. Now they've got Embiid, they've got Boban, they've got Harris, they've got Ben Simmons can play the 4 if they need to. They have Jonah Bolden, Amir Johnson is their deep veteran option there. So I would stay away from Kansas if I was Philly.
Okay. What about JaMychal Green and Garrett Temple? Do you think they stay in L.A.?
I do think they're going to stay in L.A. I think the Clippers, when they made the Harris trade, it looked like they said, all right, forget it. We're completely punting on this season. And, we're content to fall back and keep our first-round pick because it's lottery protected. If they make the playoffs, that pick goes to Boston. So it looked like the Clippers were kind of going back. Now it looks like what they said was, well, hey, we cleared the deck of as much money as we can for the future. Well, let's just, see what we can do around these guys. So I think it's more likely than not that the Clippers keep those two, but we'll see. It could be one of those. This could be one of those ones where sometimes they'll keep these guys for a week or two, see where things go, and then they'll buy them out after that if things aren't really working out. So that could be something to watch down, in the next couple of weeks.
By the way, for Sixer fans out there, Mike Muscala, of course, got traded to the Clippers and then got traded to the Lakers for Michael Beasley. What's up with the Lakers? I mean, they weren't able to get the Anthony Davis thing done. Now what? I mean, that team seems like a disaster.
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, we saw they got absolutely hammered by the Pacers the other night by 40-something points, worst loss of LeBron James' career of a game he actually played in. So it's going to be really hard for them. Now what they got to do is sit all those guys down and tell all those kids who were very prominently mentioned of hey, we want you. We're happy to have you here. Let's go make a playoff run together, when they know quite well that they were trying to trade him. So that's going to be tough. Muscala coming in, they traded Zubac away. That removes his restricted free agency from their concerns going forward. So really, at this point, the Lakers are kind of trying to regroup around the guys that they have. They're keeping the books clear so they can make a run in free agency this summer. That's really all it's about for them now. If they make the playoffs this year, which I have a hard time envisioning a LeBron James team not making it, they'll get in there and then see if they can make some noise. But it's really all about the future for the Lakers.
What a mess. Keith Smith, Yahoo, at Keith Smith NBA. You look at what the Lakers, the Anthony Davis thing. If you were New Orleans, did they play it right, or would you have traded them for that bundle of guys that the Lakers tried throwing at you?
Yeah, I think they 100% played it right. When you look at it, we saw what that team that New Orleans would have gotten was over the last month while LeBron James has been out. And it just wasn't very good, and it certainly wasn't good enough to compete in the Western Conference. And the Pelicans made it quite clear they were going to go one of two directions after they traded Davis. They were either going to be still really competitive and try to be a playoff team, probably not this year, but next year, or they were going to completely bottom this thing out and go all the way. All the Lakers package does is you're too good to be really, really bad, but you're not good enough to make the playoffs. We saw that over the last month when LeBron was out. So the Pelicans, held out. They said, we're not doing it. Now if the Lakers had said, all right, fine, we'll do the 4 or the 5 picks or whatever it is and swap rights in between and everything else, then maybe the Pelicans might have jumped on it. But they waited, and now what they're going to do is they're going to go into the summer with Boston able to bid and really open the rest of this market up and say, all right, now it's a full market. We've got 29 teams that are really focused, and we can talk to them. Let's get something done here versus, let's settle for a package that, quite frankly, we don't think is, as good as some others seem to think it is.
All right, Keith Smith, at Keith Smith NBA, and, of course, the trade season finally over. But, Keith, the buyout market might even be crazy, just as crazy, not crazier.
It's certainly going to be. There's a lot of big names out there, a lot of wings out there. There's a lot of big on the market. Keep an eye on the Atlanta Hawks. They didn't find anything to their liking today for guys like Jeremy Lin, Dwayne Dedmon, or Kent Bazemore, but those guys are all free agents to be. So the motivation to keep them around could lessen for Atlanta as we go here. But those guys like being in Atlanta.
Can I just interject a quick question?
Yeah.
Why is the buyout market in recent years become so different than 3-4 years ago? You never heard wow, the buyout market is is it because the propensity of teams to not care about losing as much that they're just saying these guys might help us win, we don't need them, somebody else can have them?
Yeah, there's definitely that portion of it. There's teams that look at it and say, okay, we're no longer competitive. This guy's a free agent anyway, so this doesn't matter if we buy him out now or we just let his contract expire. Let's let him get out of here and let him go somewhere else where he wants to play. And so we see that we saw that really come to light as teams call it tanking if you want, call it prioritizing after the trade deadline on what they want to be. There's just no reason to keep these guys around. The other thing is, the NBA is a relationship game, so always remember, if you're a guy like Enes Kanter and you're the Knicks, you don't need him. It doesn't impact your cap one way or the other to buy him out. So you're going to buy him out, and then his agent hopefully remembers, hey, thanks for doing that favor for me. Now when we're in negotiations for a guy next time around, I'll do you a favor. Maybe I'll steer my guy towards you over another team or something like that. Nobody ever does anything just because they're nice in sports, and the NBA is no different.
It just feels a little dirty. That's all. I don't love the fact that these good teams, are just snagging good players from bad teams because those teams want to lose. It just seems like it's not right. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like that guy who in your fantasy football league, when he's out, he throws a hissy fit and waves all of his guys. and everybody starts picking them all up
Yeah.
off the waiver wire. But yeah, that's what it feels like, the real life version of that. And I think it stands out because we don't see it in other sports. You know, it's not like in the NFL. You know, okay, we're out of it, so we're gonna, you know, we're gonna waive our quarterback because we're out of it and let him go pick another team. That just doesn't happen like that.
Keith Smith, great stuff. Follow him at Keith Smith NBA. And as the buyout stuff happens, we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll talk to Keith down the road. Thanks, pal.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.